Today we're going to talk about interest and motivation. Let's start with some guiding questions. What are key concepts related to research on interest? What principles and implementation strategies align with research on interest? And finally, how do we assess interest? Okay, starting with what are key concepts related to research on interest? Well, we have to start with the construct of interest itself. There are two types of interest: individual and situational. Individual interest develops slowly and is relatively long-lasting. And it provides personal relevance and meaning. Individual interest may facilitate enduring through boring situations. It sustains itself. And individual interest can lead to intrinsic motivation. So let's contrast that with situational interest. Situational interest is triggered by environmental factors, and it may or may not continue beyond the short term. Situational factors may lead to individual interest, even when no individual interest exists in the first place. Situational interest can lead to individual interest, which can lead to intrinsic motivation. So as you see, situational interest can be bootstrapped to promote the more enduring, long-lasting form of interest, which is individual interest. What is the impact of interest on learning and motivation? Research indicates that interest is related to learning and performance in three important ways. First, interest increases motivation, engagement, and persistence. Situational interest has a positive effect on extrinsic motivation, whereas personal interest has a positive long-term effect on intrinsic motivation. Presumably, external factors such as an enthusiastic supervisor or interesting tasks provide external motivation to learn more about a domain. Once situational interest develops into more well-developed individual interests, external factors are likely to play a much smaller role in motivation, whereas intrinsic motivation and enjoyment would increase in their role in that situation. Second, interest, whether individual or situational, predicts self-regulation, and it determines whether a person sets goals, uses effective strategies, and monitors their performance. Third, interest also predicts learning and performance outcomes. So as interested individuals construct understanding via more in-depth information processing than disinterested individuals, give you an example of that. Instead of depending on just rote strategies, interested learners create more meaningful strategies, such as relating the new information to their own prior knowledge and seeking out more information, self-testing their knowledge. So as you can see, this kind of interest could be more facilitative of learning. What principles and implementation strategies align with research on interest? Well, there are principles that can guide the implementation of solutions and strategies to address both individual and situational interest. For example, if you are a designer of instruction, you have to ask yourself, have I made this task interesting in a way that can spark either individual or situational interest? But if you're a learner, you have to ask yourself, was this task interesting to me? Here are some implementation strategies to address the issue of interest. And note that they address both individual and situational interest. So for example, you can incorporate real life original source materials that are vivid, varied, and novel, or that create surprise or disequilibrium. These naturally spark interest. You can activate personal interest by providing choice and control, and subsequently build upon personal interest in prior knowledge. Individuals are much more interested in tasks that they have chosen and feel they have control over. You can use learner-friendly training materials that are clear, coherent, and complete. It's very hard to be interested in something that you don't understand, so increased clarity and coherence really helps promote interest. And you can model enthusiasm or interest in the topic yourself as an instructor. How do we assess interest? Well, there are several different ways you can go about assessing interest. You can simply list different tasks and ask the learner to rank them in terms of which interests them the most. Similarly, you can give people a range of task options to choose from and then observe their behavior. Do they choose to engage in this task or a different task? And then do they persist and do they exert mental effort? This is a really effective way to determine their level of interest in the task. Naturally, you can just ask a question such as, how do you feel about this topic? You want the interview questions to be as non-directional as possible. So instead of just asking yes or no questions, such as, does doing X interest you? You want to ask a more open-ended question, such as, how do you feel about doing this particular task? Not even bringing up interest, just really seeing if interest emerges by the answer you get from that question. A very popular way to assess learners is to use a Likert scale survey. And they're really easy to construct and they're inexpensive to administer, especially if you have to assess interest in a large group of learners. Likert scales have limitations, however. That is that the items have to be really carefully crafted to get to the core of what you are trying to evaluate. So you can ask questions such as, learning new ways to incorporate technology into training is interesting to me. And then provide a Likert scale where you can agree or disagree across a scale of maybe 5 to 7 points as to whether that reflects your true interest or not.